Hey everyone, Shark here. It's a new year and there's a new Abyss, and in this video I'm going to bring you my Abyss Floor 12 run. I don't normally upload these types of videos, but I was having a bit of fun with this one because I ran a Hot Rocks Navia team on one side and a Cold Water Wanderer team on the other side. Throughout the video, I'll explain why I did what I did, as well as give you some tips and tricks for the various chambers of Floor 12. I'll also show you my character builds because I know people will be curious about that. If you like this type of video, please let me know in the comments below, as this is a little bit different style from what I normally post. While I could have cleared this Abyss very easily and probably a lot faster with a Hyperbloom and National team, I decided to use these teams because honestly the Blessing is just really good for Navia, and this version of the Abyss is not nearly as challenging as the previous one with all the Pyro Lectors. The Hot Rocks Navia team I'm running on the first half is designed to take advantage of the Geo Resonance, which is a very strong elemental resonance, as well as the Pyro Resonance, and use Xiangling and Bennett, who are just a great pairing. Xiangling is great for creating lots and lots of crystallized shards, Bennett buffs attack as a healer, and I have Zhongli as another support with a Favonius Lance for a little bit more energy and also a little bit more crystallize. This is a super tanky, super comfortable team to play, and when everything lines up right and you hit those 300k plus Navia skills, ooh, feels so good. We start off floor 12 by fighting the Perpetual Mechanical Array, and we get shafted with our card options immediately. Normally the extra 80 Elemental Mastery is really good, and it can be even more effective than the crit card for damage, but it doesn't really help us that much here since we aren't really concerned about making any offensive reactions. Around this point in the fight, I'm expecting the boss to become invulnerable and summon these smaller ruin enemies, but it took a little longer to summon than I expected, so I just did another rotation knowing that it wasn't too far off from summoning them. I knew that my abilities would either be active when the enemies spawned, or that I would be able to get them up very quickly with little downtime. When I noticed I needed to beat the Ruin Cruiser to make the boss vulnerable again, I tried to position its back towards the boss. Since this enemy dashes backwards, I wanted it and the boss to be in the same area so I wouldn't have to run out of Bennett's circle so I could hit the PMA again. What I didn't expect was for Navia to finish the boss off so quickly that I could not get enough energy back for Bennett. Oops. On the next side, we have our Cold Water Wanderer team. I named it this because it can cause the freeze reaction, but it barely does, so it's really just like cold water. Wanderer, Furina, and Xingqiu are here for damage and lots of numbers, and Mika is here to be a healer and to give my Wanderer more attack speed so he turns into an Animo machine gun. This team can pump out a lot of damage, but it's pretty weak against the second side of floor 12 chamber 2 since it doesn't break geoshields very effectively. However, it does pretty well against the Thunder Manifestation here, since the boss moves around a lot and this team has some pretty good range. So I just go through regular rotations and attack this boss as normal while trying my best to use the invincibility frames of dashing or using an elemental burst to avoid the more damaging attacks from the boss. This team has a lot of offensive power, but it's very squishy. Wanderer has some of the lowest health and defense of a 5-star, and Furina continually draining his health does not help him stay alive any better. Mika's here as a healer, but honestly his heals are kinda weak, and he's mostly here for the attack speed buff that he gives Wanderer. Luckily, Xingqiu gives us damage reduction and interruption resistance, and that is a big help throughout all of floor 12. When I notice that I have about 45 seconds to get 3 stars on this chamber, I also see that the boss has quite low health, so I switch Furina's Watery Entourage into the healing mode and plan to get a bunch of HP back as well as a bunch of energy for the next chamber. So I switch around and heal the team, use skills to collect energy particles, but I don't use anyone's burst unless I know that I can get it back before I beat the boss. I just do some attacks after that with Wanderer and avoid being hit by the Thunder Cage and the Thunder Wall Squish attacks, which do the most damage. Next we move on to floor 12 chamber 2 and we get a good card this time, at least for Navia. Extra skill damage, we love to see it. Because I beat the PMA on the previous chamber faster than I expected, I don't have enough energy on Bennett to open with his burst and do a proper rotation, so I decide to do a scuffed one instead. It feels pretty bad to use Xiangling's burst outside of Bennett's burst and not snapshot his attack buff, but it doesn't really matter since we can beat these enemies relatively quickly. I also start using Zhongli's burst more often, not for the damage, but to keep the enemies in one spot for just a few seconds. The enemies in this chamber tend to move around a lot, and I want them grouped up nice and tight so they can get up close and personal with Navia's Gunbrella. I did notice that the crystallized shards sometimes appear behind an enemy, making it hard to pick them up, and around this time I also realized that I really need to start short holding Navia's skill since I can quickly aim it but also absorb the crystallized shards. I hardly played 4-12 optimally, but it honestly didn't really end up mattering. Once I've chunked down the Ruin Grader's health on this chamber, I make sure this team has plenty of energy for the final chamber and then it's on to the other side. This chamber was honestly the hardest for me, and it's not because it's inherently really difficult, but because this team is just not very well equipped to deal with it. None of the characters on this team break the Geoslime's shields very effectively, and so we waste a lot of time dealing with them. Since it's also a very squishy team, I have to be very careful about catching stray lava churl attacks, since they can basically kill anyone on the team with their strong attacks. Even my 42,000 HP Furina is no match for them after her health has been drained. Luckily, we get some motivation from a dancing Eula that someone redeemed on stream, and everything is all good. I use a lot more charge attacks with Wanderer on this chamber because of their AoE capabilities. With all of the attack speed bonus I have, it's usually better to use his normal attacks, but the AoE ends up helping quite a bit here, especially against the slimes. This side of floor 12 chamber 2 would actually be a lot easier if I were to use a national team, as the combination of Bennett, Xiangling, and Xingqiu with someone like Sucrose or Kazuha can break the Geo shields really fast. But I don't get to enjoy using Wanderer too much in the Abyss, so I wanted to stick with this team. When fighting the Geo Vishaps, I start using normal attacks again. AoE damage would be better, but Wanderer's charge attacks will split the Geo Vishaps apart, and I don't want that, so it's back to normal attacks. When the Lava Churls spawn, I have about 40 seconds to beat both of them. It seems like it'll be pretty tight, but I think we'll be fine. This team's offensive capabilities can punch through these big churls pretty well, and while I'd like to have some time to gather up my energy and make sure everyone's healed up, I'm hoping that the big energy orbs they drop will be enough to get the team back to full energy, or at least close enough to it for the final chamber. So I just go through my normal rotation, avoiding their big powerful attacks by either dodging, using a dash in the air with Wanderer, or an iframe from an elemental burst, and we clear the chamber with about 9 seconds left for 3 stars. Next, we move on to the final chamber of floor 12, and the first side is absolute food for the Hot Rocks Navia team. The Hydro Tulpa has a permanent Hydro Aura, meaning that it is much easier to cause the crystallized reaction. But Xiangling can also vaporize every single hit of her elemental burst. And because Xiangling's burst does not have any internal cooldown for causing any elemental reactions, her burst can continuously cause 40,000 damage hits, while we can still get enough crystallized shards for Navia to release her absolute nuke of a skill, which in this chamber hit for upwards of 326,000 damage. And I have to be honest about the Hydro Tulpa, I really don't know what this boss does. I farmed it plenty enough, but I never really paid attention to what the small little adds do. They seem to buff the boss and make it big and angry, so I just do my best to take them out early, which is probably a good decision since they die in one tap of Bennett's skill. But I do know that this boss likes to move around a lot, and I try to manipulate its AI to come towards me. That worked successfully in the beginning of the fight, but towards the end it jumps to the complete opposite side of the arena with another additional summon. I quickly take out the mini Tulpa and then go back to blasting the boss. Next, we move on to the final challenge for the Cold Water Wanderer team, and this is a breeze compared to the last floor. I'm very comfortable fighting 2 Thunderhelm Lava Churls as I fought them in the Emblem domain for all of 2.0, and I know which attacks I can take and which ones will probably kill someone. That doesn't stop me from getting punched in the face a few times, but I never felt like I was ever in any real danger. I had plenty of time for this challenge, and I could have played more defensively here, but I didn't know how tanky the 2 Eremites would be, so I just decided to go all in on offense. I found out that I didn't really need to do that, as I had about a minute left to get 3 stars on this chamber, and it took me around 20 seconds to beat both the Eremites and their summoned pets when they spawned. The general strategy I had here was to manipulate the enemy AI to group up enemies and AoE them down. However, this is a bit of a challenge because if you don't have a grouper like Kazuha or Sucrose, they can just stay spread apart. The Eremites like to stay at a distance and use range attacks, while their summoned pets are super aggressive and like to jump right on top of you with big attacks of their own. When fighting these enemies, you want to prioritize taking out their pets first, as they are very annoying and very aggressive, but they also have lower health than their Eremites who summon them, and they deal tons of damage and stun the Eremites when they die. Once I take out the pets, the Eremites are sitting ducks, and I finish them off quickly with over 40 seconds remaining for 3 stars on this chamber. This abyss was definitely a lot easier than the previous one, since you can use a lot more types of teams to effectively tackle it. I'm sure people are interested to see my character builds that I used for this abyss, so I'll show those to you now. And if you want to see all of the character builds that I have, check out the video in the description, as it has every single character that I have built, with the exception of Navia, who you can see here.